get started. Let me share the screen and start the Xcode. Great. All right, so I hope everybody can see my screen, and I hope that you guys are familiar with Xcode, and this is not the first time you see the Xcode environment. So briefly, before I get started about the XCUItest, I want to give a quick introduction of what we're going to do, why we're all here, and what we're going to do during today's session. So number one, the reason we're all here is to show you the native iOS test automation with the library, which is part of the Xcode. It's called XCUItest. Historically, XCUItest is nothing more than just a few libraries in addition of the previously used XCTest library, which was used for the unit testing. Prior to 2015-14, prior to the existence of XCUItest, it was UI testing framework, which actually had to write in a weird JavaScript before, and nobody used that. Luckily, after the 2015, I believe, introduction in WWDC, they introduced something more native. Originally, it supported both programming languages, Swift and the older version, Objective-C. Obviously, for the past few years, people tried to use Swift for writing this test. Again, XCUItest is nothing new. You're still writing the test in XCTest, which is more unit test framework. XCUItest just helps to drive that visually on the screen and make the functional testing more easier. For simplicity of displaying how effective is the XCUItest library, we're going to use the OrderMe application, which is built by us. This is the in-house application, and it's we're going to share with you the link to the GitHub repository, so you can will be able to download this. What you're not going to get the test. So you can actually play with yourself. You can check out the repository and then watch the video again and pause and repeat what we're going to do in the steps. So agenda for today is to introduce you to the XCUItest in the context of the application called OrderMe, which is the application under test. We're not going to go too much, in depth, because we're not sure who's our audience. So therefore, we're going to focus on the fundamentals, on basics. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to record our test. We're going to let me rewind back. First, I'm going to introduce you to the OrderMe application, what we're going to test. Second, we're going to add the test target. And for those folks who tried to use the Appium before and set up on Appium could take literally a day, here it takes literally seconds to add the test target. Then we're going to record our first test to show you the record feature and how it's actually ineffective. Then we're going to do a cleanup and refactoring. And then we're going to show you introduce you to the accessibility identifiers and why they're important in the context of native iOS testing. And then we're going to, decorate everything with assertions to make our test meaningful. We're going to talk about sleeps briefly and how to use explicit sleeps versus the hard-coded sleeps. And obviously, we're going to talk about next steps, where else you can educate yourself to learn about architecture for XCUItest and in-depth problem solving with XCUItest. So let's get started. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use the OrderMe application, and you can see we loaded in a simulator for you from the Xcode. So OrderMe is actually a real application. It's a client-server application. So the data you see here is actually loaded from AWS server. You can see it's a bunch of the restaurants, list of restaurants with information, and you can search them. Once you tap on the restaurant, you get to the restaurant details screen where you can actually do certain actions, such as you can detect table if you have a real device. You can scan the QR code, and that way the server knows which table they have to serve. You can call a waiter for certain actions like bring a menu or bring the bill. Or you can look at the menu for the restaurant and see which dishes you would like to choose. You can select dishes, you can select number of wished dishes, and you can actually add up to your order. This application is actually a great application for the beginners for starting automation because it has everything you need to use the features of XCUItest for the manipulation of such application. All right, let's go back to our Xcode. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm assuming you don't see, I mean, you at least seen the Xcode once in your life or tried to build this simple iOS application. It's really simple if you use other IDEs like IntelliJ before. Xcode is self-explanatory. On the left-hand side, you can see all the files where you have the application under test. By the way, when you're writing test in XCUItest, you're going to live in the same code base as the application under test. This way, whenever you're going to make a pull request for code reviews or need the help, everything will be in the same code base. So you will live in the same space, followed by the same rules as developers of the iOS application, which has a lot of benefits, by the way. So the first thing we have to start, or I would say the first thing we have to do in order to start XCUItest, we have to add what we call target. To add a target in Xcode, you have to just click on the plus button and choose UI testing bundle. Here you can name it the way you want it. Usually it's just the conventionally, you name it as a name of application plus test as extension. Please, for the language use Swift, Objective-C is a little bit outdated and somewhat cumbersome. And application we're going to test is order me. Then click finish, and you will see it will be a new target. So in the context of the UI test, it actually will build two applications. When we're going to build this, and we're going to see it in the simulator, when we're going to build the application, we will have the application itself installed in the simulator. Boris, while I'm talking, I'm doing a cleanup a little bit from the previous session. 1 second, please. So I'll make sure we clean up repository. It has a footprint of the previous test. Perfect, good to go. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be two applications installed on the simulator. It will be the application under test and the target we just added, which is like a driver for the test. So unlike Espresso framework, which is actually built for the Android, XCUItest is actually lives as a separate entity, but you will see during the demo how it works. So once you edit the target, Xcode automatically generates the template. You can see it created an extra folder on the left-hand side called OrderMeUITest. And inside that folder, you will see the OrderMeUITest.Swift automatically generated file class for our test, we'll call test suite, which is extends XCTest cases, which is the library which we'll need for writing our test. It created a template with certain functions we call methods. Like one you can see on line 13 is set up with the error, which we rarely actually use, so I'm going to clean it up. Okay, and then a tier down with the error is also rarely used. We can also clean it up. Perfect. Great. The most important thing you're going to see here is actually the test itself. Test example is the one that will be the test itself. Obviously, test example doesn't have any explanation what the test does, so we're going to change to the meaningful name of our method. But for now, let's keep it as it is. I want just to run this dummy test just to show what's going to happen and explain what the line 20 or line 19 actually doing. So in order to run tests, there's a few ways to do from Xcode. The easiest way you can see on line 17, you can actually tap on the left-hand side and run the test example method. Very important thing to note, if you want this function to be a test, you must add a test extension to this. That's how the Xcode will know it's a test and not just another helper function. So we're going to click on the button on the left to execute the test. We can see the Xcode built successfully, and we'll launch the application. I'm going to wait for a second because it does it for the first time. Here we go. It launched the application and it's going to quit. And the reason it did nothing because we didn't actually add any steps that will drive this application. All you see here on line 19 is the variable application. We're going to talk about variables quickly right now, which is pointed to XCUI application, and on line 20, we're just launching the application. So only thing we do here in 2 lines is just launch the app. We don't do any functional drive through the application. But again, we just want to show you in this demo that how easy to start testing the XCUItest. It took us literally a few seconds to add a target. It creates the template and you can run the test. Again, if you ever encounter the setup with the third-party frameworks like API, only takes days, and I suffered myself before in past for that. So it's very, very simple to set up the native test automation frameworks. All right, let's go to the fun part of it. So the first thing we're going to do right now, we're actually going to manually walk you through the scenario we're going to do the testing for. So like a good tester, we have to understand what exactly will be tested and what we're going to automate. So we're going to click on login later button. And we're going to search for the Republic restaurant. We're going to tap on Republic restaurant. And we're going to click on detect table and put a table 3, select table. Then we're going to click on call waiter and tap on the bring a menu. And we're going to assert that we get this alert, got it, the waiter's on the way. That will be the final result for our test, which we're going to write assertion for. So nothing crazy, just very smooth, happy pass scenario. And that's what we're going to automate together during today's session. All right, let's get started. So first thing out of first, we would like to show you the recording feature. Recording feature is built since the original version of XCUItest library. And a lot of people who start with XCUItest, they think this is the way to go. We're going to show you because you're going to probably be tempted to use it. And we're going to show you why it's actually not effective. But anyway, it's the best way to do that. So we're going to click on the record button, which will actually launch the simulator. And now you can drive the application and will generate steps while we'll use the application. So we're going to go through all the steps we just went before. We're going to tap on login later. We're going to tap on Republic. We're going to tap on detect table. We're going to navigate to the view, select table 3, select table, go on to call waiter, and pick the bring a menu option and click OK. Going back to Xcode, you will see that starting line 23, Xcode automatically generated the code for you. At the same time, you will see that it also generated a bunch of errors. And it's exactly, I'm not a big fan to use recording because it seems like a logical step to use as a beginner, but I'm going to walk you step by step right now with Boris together and let you know item by item how to clean up. You'll see the cleanup will take longer time rather than actually writing text from scratch. So first you can see a repetition here. On line 19 and 20, we're already actually referencing to XCUI application library, and we're calling a launch method. So we can clean up that. Next, I think we can use the variable. Again, variables in the Swift are essential, right? And there are 2 types of variables. There's variables let, which is constants and very favorable in Swift programming. And there's vars, which is a regular variable. So you will see that during today's session, we're going to use all the lets, which is all constants. Again, Swift is very strict about this and they like to use constants. So we're going to declare a variable. We're going to call it login later button and reference to the static text login later. and then we're gonna use the tap action. So we're gonna pause here for a second, and I'm gonna let you know where all these things are coming from. So number one, if you notice, we are referencing app, which we define line 19. If you click on XCUI application and jump to the definition in Xcode, it will launch the documentation for this library. So you can see that XCUI application actually extending XCUI element. Remember, I told you that XCUItest is nothing more than a few libraries written on top of the XCUItest to reference UI elements in the application. And you can see that you can scan through this by yourself when you're going to play at home. You see a bunch of methods, which is part of the XCUI application library itself, and you will probably launch, or you can see launch environment, for instance, with one state, wait. There's a lot of helper functions that you will use in order to drive the application. Let's go back to our code. Great. Again, if you notice, we reference the app. Like the line 20, we call the function called launch. Launch, obviously, self-explanatory. It's not the function we wrote. It's part of the XCUI application library. And you can navigate and read what it does in a hint. So launch is the application. Line 22, we define the variable login later button. Again, reference to our application and static text. The question is, what's a login later button? Let's go back to our login later button. So you are probably going to think login later just a text, right? Or a string in the programming, jargon, but it's not. It's actually what we call accessibility identifier, which we have used. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I went a little bit forward. Login later, it is text. And the problem is this, that when you're going to reference and follow the string, which is actually, you see on the screen, it could be translated. A lot of applications, again, translated to multiple languages. And therefore, if this test is running in an English localization, it passes. But if it's going to run, let's say, in French, it's going to fail because login later will be in French. Therefore, accessibility identifiers are essential in test automation because they are unique to the UI element and never going to get translated. So all we're going to do right now on line 22, we're going to show you how to change the login later text to accessibility identifier. So all we're going to do right now, we're going to use a tool under developer tools called Accessibility Inspector. You can only launch this tool when you have a simulator open, and you can see it on the left-hand side. You have to attach it to the simulator, which is iPhone 12 simulator, and navigate to the login later button. And you're going to see right now, it has identifier login later button. A lot of you are going to think that probably all these identifiers will be available for you off the bat. It's actually not. Developers have to add them. Obviously, if you are a beginner to the native test automation, you will need to ask developers to add it. Later, when you learn more about the structure of the application under test, you will be able to add it yourself. And it's not super hard. You just have to know where. So all we're going to do right now, I'm going to change this to add reference to the buttons. And instead of using the static text, I'm going to use a login later button identifier, which is bulletproof in test automation. Great. Let's move to the next step of optimization. Is Republic restaurant. So first, we have to actually define a variable called the Republic restaurant, reference to the static text Republic. Again, in this case, Republic is just the name of restaurant. So we're not going to worry about accessibility identifiers, and we're going to tap on it. Perfect. Let's move on. So similarly, we're going to declare variable detect table option. Point to the static text detect table. you're going to see a new reference to collection view. If you notice right here, it's a collection of different menus. And that's how you reference if you have a collection application. And we're going to tap on it to get focus. And then we're going to reference the table number text field, which is actually accessibility identifier. Perfect. And we're going to tap on it to get it focused. And we're going to.
So you can see, recorder missed the
step entirely.
The step entirely.
Thank you, Boris. Yes. Yeah. Again, it's a great example why recorder is going to mislead you, because what happened when Boris navigated the application did not even record the step of tapping on it and type the 3 for the table detection. So again, recording is not going to help. It's just going to misguide you. And here we're going to type the text, which is another API from the XCUItest library. I'm going to use a string 3. And next, we are going to select table button, define the variable select table button in reference to the button select table. If you see what we do right now, which is basically decoupling all this spaghetti code which was generated by the recorder, so it actually becomes more readable, makes sense. Okay, next step will be the call waiter option. Again, call waiter option is part of collection view, so we're going to reference the static text call waiter. And then the following is obviously the reference to the alert. We're going to see that. So we're going to call waiter alert, app.alerts, and we're going to define the bring a menu button, reference to the alert buttons, and bring a menu is the name. And we're going to tap on it. Perfect. Now we're going to define the variable called got it alert. We're going to reference to the got it alert that you see on line 45. And we're probably going to pause here, right, for a second. So let me quickly walk you what just been done here. All we did, we basically recorded the first test. Obviously, it had a lot of unnecessary code and it missed a few steps. We just did a refactoring, which makes our test more readable. To be honest, this is just the first initial step when you're a beginner, but this is now how the test look in the real world because it's missing architecture. What you see on the screen is good enough when you have probably 5 or 6 tests. When you have hundreds of them, this code will have a lot of repetition. It will probably require some sort of like page object model architecture, which is out of scope of this introductory lecture. So, but regardless, it looks way cleaner than we initially recorded it. So all we will do right now is try to run it and see what's going to happen. Let's execute the test. And let's look at the simulator. Yes, you can see test is running, and you're probably already like wowing how fast it is. Yeah, native is actually the best way to go for several reasons. Like I said, you are living the same code base, you're writing the same programming language as developers, using exactly the same framework as the developers using for unit test. You just use extra library for functional testing. So, and by living in the same code base with developers, you can learn the application itself. So usually people who would like to become iOS developers, test automation in the context of native world will get you a step closer to this. So to become a real software developer engineer and test, not just a tester. All right, let's finish up our test. by adding the assertion. So like as mentioned, the assertion library already is part of Xcode. We're going to use XCUItest. We're going to reference to the got it alert and use the function called exist, which checks for the existing. And second argument for the assertion is the string we have to, or text we have to visualize in our logs if the test failing. So it's just a failure message. Let's run our test again and see if the assertion is actually going to work. Okay, thank you, Boris, for splitting the screen. And you can see the failure. A lot of you might wonder why it failed. And the reason is because what happened, the test was faster than it expected to be on assertion. It didn't wait for it, right? And that's why it failed.
Moreover, the client, which is iOS application, shows the got it alert only after the server-side backend confirms that the admin page received the request. If the user requested the waiter to bring a menu, then user will see the confirmation screen only after the server really got the request. So that's why it can take some time for request and response.
For the round trip, thank you, Boris. Yes, the round trip from the client and when the server returns the response and parsing the application, the test cannot guarantee that. And therefore, we have to either use the sleep, and we can do a hard code sleep here. We can use a sleep function and put like 2 seconds and the round test, and fingers crossed it will pass. And it will probably pass. The problem with this approach, I've seen people a lot of times use sleeps, is that we cannot guarantee the exact time for this round trip from the request from the application to response, get back to the client and get parsed. So you see the test succeeded under our environment. However, if you run this test somewhere in a cloud solution, let's say like a browser stack or SaaS labs, anywhere on any device farm, it could fail because the latency could be longer on other environments. So therefore, there is a mechanism built into the XCUItest library for explicit wait, and it's called wait for existence. So all I have to do is just add to the UI element wait for existence and put the maximum timeout that you're allowing for this server client server interaction. It's much more bulletproof. Actually, this API only appeared in like 2016-17, not the first version of XCUItest, but luckily we already have it, so you don't have to write it yourself. I remember back in the day, you have to write your own explicit waits. So luckily it's already built in for us. And test is passed. So Boris already showed you there's a view for test results. If you look right now over here on left-hand side panel, right, for the test execution, you can see test there's only one test. Obviously, the good practice is to change the name of this function from test example to we're going to call this test bring menu. Let's do it. Perfect. A lot of times you great. Let's run it. Yeah, another great part of the Xcode, which is I think very visual, is for to see like different logs will happen during the test and more visual representation of test execution. I think Boris they changed it to when it's only failing right now. Thank you. Here we go. On the very right-hand side, you can see the menu, left-hand side panel to show more detailed test execution, and you can see step by step what happened, and it actually collects the screenshots of each step for you. I think that's another great. Here's a step by step what happened during the test execution. which is very good part of debugging. There are other ways you can debug a test during failures to put breakpoints, just like developers put in unit test and drive, step by step your test. But again, the debugging for the testing is out of scope for this lecture. So you can see it took 14 seconds to run end-to-end test, which is not bad for UI tests at all. I know back in Appium days, like 2015, 14, it used to take 1 minute to drive the test. So I think that for UI functional tests is not bad. So the following question will be probably you guys ask, like, what's next? Okay, this is just the introduction. This is just the beginning, right? Obviously, what you have to do in order to scale. This is just the tip of the iceberg. In the real projects, in real world projects, the architecture of this will be way more complex. Number one, the tests have to be abstracted from the logic. So if you have any logic, or I would say some like wrappers or helper classes, functions, objects that you need, you probably have to obfuscate it in the page object, which we have. It's a little bit different than the web, to be honest, due to the nature of the Swift development and the nature of the iOS development. But you have to do something that will elegantly keep the architecture thin and concise. Number one. Number two, that you have to prepare a test for some sort of CI execution, because test locally, it doesn't make any sense. This test have to run every time the developers make a change, like at least every pull request and consecutive commit. So we're talking about some sort of the trigger, which will trigger the test, every change the developer make, which we talk about continuous integration system. And to make your test super stable for the CI system, you have to use advanced features such as network stubbing, or we call network mocking. Probably heard about this, to cut off from the backend, because we're testing UI only here. We're not testing the end-to-end things. Again, there's a lot of great things you can do to this test to make this stable, scalable, right? So they can sustain the CI system and bring the value to your company. However, this is out of scope of this presentation, because we only have 1 hour. So the answer from my side, or suggestion, is that you have to go out there and search for something that more advanced, something that connects the real world. What's going to be the reality when you're going to do it at the real job. Unfortunately, I searched the entire internet, YouTube, you name it, and I couldn't find such course. Maybe you can try your luck and find it, but I found some pieces. Like, I know there's a lot of on YouTube videos on a page object, but that page object has the flows. Like, for instance, the people put a lot of things in the common classes to create abstraction, but those common classes become like, bloated over the course of the year, very hard to manage. So they don't have the architecture will sustain the growth. I've seen page objects, but not like, they probably scale for maybe 20 to 50 tests, not to 500 tests. I couldn't find a great examples of network stubbing, because all of them are just very vague. They just go like with simple case. And I think this is the hardest topic in test automation, is how to mock your entire network, request responses, and make this super useful within the context of onboarding new people and sustain the project. And probably the most painful topic, once you have a lot of tests, is the test parallelization. I couldn't find much of frameworks, because the native parallelization, or we call sharding for tests to speed up execution, that come with the Xcode, is not working, super flaky. Me and Boris and our team tried to search for alternatives. We probably spent a year to find anything that exists. All the people claim they know how to do this. Unfortunately, those frameworks don't work. So we end up writing our own one. We call it SIFT. So we have an open source framework for test parallelization. And this is so essential to the test, because you have to come up with a certain time frame, right? Like 15, 20 minutes. So you have to shard the test across multiple devices, or simulators. How are you going to do that if there's nothing available? So I just want to bring this up so you understand there's a lot more than just this. This is just introductory thing, just to get you sparked, to get you excited about this. Luckily, me and Boris spent literally the whole year to build the course, which is what I just mentioned a minute ago, covers everything. It covers the scalable architecture. It covers parallel execution in CI. It covers network mocking. All these topics are covered in this course. Right now, it undergoes the beta. It's not in production yet. We partner up with the Headspin company, headspin.io. And I'm going to share the link with organizers of this session so they can share with you. They have a Headspin University, and the course will probably going to come up in the very near future. We're on the finish line. We're talking about maybe in a month. You're going to see this course. I think the price is not set yet, but it will be something reasonable because this course will not have any analogy on the internet. It's very comprehensive and will be like probably like a few $100s. But it took us literally almost, in August will be a year when we started this course, and it's very high quality. We use the professional microphones. We use we actually wrote scripts. So if you cannot understand our English, you will get also the subscript for that. So it's really a well-produced course, and it's coming very soon. So we're gonna let you know via the organizers of this session when it's going to be ready, once it's going to get out of the beta, so they can share with you. And again, if you would like to proceed forward and learning about XCUItest and iOS development, that's the course, a great course that you can move forward. I think that's all we have for today's presentation, right, Boris? I'd like to thank you, Boris, to help me out typing while I was talking. And I think it's a great time for Q&A session if they have one. Let's go back to the stop sharing. If you guys have anything, you can type in chat, I believe. Or my question to the host is how we're going to do this. I think we have only like a few attendees. Okay, here we go. Very cool presentation. One more content. Yeah. What I'm going to do actually, number one, I'm going to send you to a link to the Headspin University so you can follow them once the course will be announced and ready. They have APM course from Jonathan Leaps, who's a good friend of mine. Very good APM course. Our course is going to come probably in August. I'm hoping so. But I'm also going to share with alternative content about XCUItest. I'm going to find some links for tutorials that I think are more or less good for the beginners. I'm a big fan of alternatives, so you can start watching something to prep yourself for much more advanced course. So I will give more content. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Awesome. Yes, if there's no more question, we can stop recording and quit the session, and I'm sure that the recording will be shared with a much more larger audience. Thank you so much, guys, for attending, and hopefully you learn something new, or at least get inspired about something new. Great. All right. Have the rest, good the rest of the day, and thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.